go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and turn the recording on now. So in service to the Bray School Lab's mission to uncovering, documenting, preserving, and disseminating the history of and the legacies of the Williamsburg Bray School, we host a monthly series on Zoom in order to share recent genealogical findings, engage the descendant community in this work in order to broaden our understanding of the legacies, and enlist the help of historians and genealogists, as well as the general public, in furthering the conversation and the research surrounding the Williamsburg Bray School. The title of the monthly series is Bray School Stories, and this evening's focus is Finding Aggie, Part 2. So first, some housekeeping items. Once again, we are recording this session. It will be available later on our YouTube channel. To find it, simply Google Bray School Lab YouTube. If you prefer not to be recorded, please feel free to access this later, the recording later on our YouTube channel. The monthly series are designed to spark conversation. I will share a slide and some information, and then we'll pause to take questions and invite you to share your thoughts and your comments. And questions can be placed in the chat and or raised following each slide. I am fortunate to have both of my colleagues here with me this evening. Tanya Meredith is our oral historian, and Dr. Maureen Elgersman Lee is the director of the W&M Bray School Lab. She's also co-hosting this evening and is carefully watching that chat as well as the waiting room. So thank you, Maureen. A feature that we started in our November session is I will be sharing a link to a Google Drive that has images of the documents referenced throughout the session. I'm happy to answer questions and hear comments about the documents as well. So let me go ahead and share that link right now so that you all have it. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat. There we go. And so that is just a link to a Google Drive that has copies of the records and links to the records, or at least where you can locate the records if you want to go back and look at them later. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. We've got a good group here this evening. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Sure I get this right. Right. Everybody with me now? Let's see. Okay. We will go ahead and get started. So, Finding Aggie, Part 2. If you were with us in November, we started to look at Aggie, who had been a Bray School scholar and wound up in Charles City County. So at that time, this is what we were able to see. I'm sorry, hold on just a second. There, we just want to make sure that this is not goofed up. Okay, great. Okay, here we go. So what we started with Aggie, we knew from the attendance list in 1762 that Aggie was approximately 7 years old and she was enslaved by Peyton Randolph. And so the research findings to date as of that session were that we knew that Aggie had been named in the wills, who she had been bequeathed to, and that she had had children, and that we saw her in 1783 and up to 1799. Tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on Kitty, her daughter Kitty. And so that's where our research is going to take us this evening. So any questions so far about attendance lists, Aggie, who these people are, anything I can answer at this point? No? All right, we're going to go ahead on. Let's dive right in. So we see Aggie in the records, and this is a screenshot of part of Betty Randolph's will. Betty Randolph was the widow of Peyton Randolph. And in Betty Randolph's will in 1780, she bequeaths her mulatto woman called Little Aggy and her daughter Betsy and her son Nathan to her nephew, Benjamin Harrison VI. And she also names Kitty, the daughter of Little Aggy, who she gives to her niece, Elizabeth Harrison. And she's very specific about this Elizabeth Harrison. It's the Elizabeth Harrison who lives with me. When you're doing this kind of research, it's important to not only be tracking the names of the enslaved people, but it's also important that you research the white family, and so that you know who all the players are. In this case, we also discovered that there were 4 nieces named Elizabeth Harrison, so we had to narrow that down a bit. And Betty Randolph's will did give us some clues as far as the person who lived with her, that Elizabeth Harrison. So then we were off to do some research. But right now, what we were able to do was reconstruct Aggy's family tree. So we had Aggy and her children, Betsy, Nathan, and Kitty, who we're concentrating on this evening. So any questions so far? I can go back on to these documents if anyone has any questions or has any comments. And yes, to answer the question that was put in the chat, what you're seeing is the bibliography. That's right. And I've provided the source citations for you. The screenshots are here during the PowerPoint presentation. And for the records that are online, I've included a link in the bibliography. All right, we'll go ahead forward. So, you're welcome. All right, so what we needed to do was really kind of map out the Harrison family tree. So Benjamin Harrison IV was the father of Elizabeth Harrison, who married Peyton Randolph. He was also the father of Benjamin Harrison V and Henry Harrison, who was the father of many other Harrisons, but for our purposes this evening, I'm just keeping the family tree pretty tight. We know from Betty Randolph's will that Aggy and Betsy and Nathan went to or were bequeathed to the son Benjamin Harrison VI, and Kitty was bequeathed to Henry Harrison. I'm sorry, to Elizabeth Harrison. Now, Henry Harrison had died in 1772, so that gave us a clue that perhaps his daughter would have been sent to live with her aunt, and we were able to narrow down Elizabeth to that. We were able to narrow down that niece, Elizabeth Harrison, to that particular, the child of Henry Harrison. So Kitty was bequeathed to her. This is a photograph of Berkeley Plantation in Charles City County, the home of the Harrison family. So I see a question in the chat. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so everybody with me so far? I feel like I'm kind of a little jumbled with some of the technology, but we're going to go forward. Okay. So we needed to then track Elizabeth Harrison. And it turns out that Elizabeth Harrison is going to marry Lewis Burwell. We were able to find the marriage record in Surrey County in 1789. But Elizabeth Harrison was actually Lewis Burwell's second wife. His first wife was Anne Spotswood, and he had a number of children with her. And then she died in the spring of 1789. And then in the fall of 1789 is when Lewis Burwell married Elizabeth Harrison, and then went on to have 4 more children with her. And his tombstone lays out everybody, who his wives were, who his children were, and in some cases, even who his children married. So this is pretty lucky for us that we have all of this information all in one place, as long as it's accurate. So again, this tombstone comes from Find a Grave. Tanya and I actually had a research trip to Mecklenburg County. We've seen the tombstone in person, so I can attest that all of this is exactly like the photograph shows. But it's important to know who all the people are in the family, because as wills and probates are made and enslaved people are in the households, you're going to see a lot of movement between these family members. So it was important to make sure we knew who all we were dealing with. I've highlighted Blair Burwell only because out of all the children from the Lewis Burwell family, he comes into play with Kitty and her descendants, but mostly we're going to be dealing with the children of Lewis and Elizabeth. We see Henry Harrison Burwell, Peyton Randolph Burwell, Jane Blair Burwell, and Martha Christian Burwell. And we see a lot of repetition from the family names being passed down. We know that Elizabeth's father was Henry Harrison. She lived in the household of Peyton Randolph. Jane Blair, we know that Lewis Burwell's grandfather was a Blair, and so was his mother, Christian Blair. And then, of course, we see the Christian showing up in his daughter's middle name. So before we go on to the next slide, does anyone have any questions or comments, or maybe just an observation that you're seeing? No? All right, I will go on to the next screen. So knowing that Lewis and Elizabeth marry in 1789, we looked at the personal property tax lists. And Mecklenburg County is great because normally in Virginia tax records, we see the names of the enslaved members of the household in 1783, in 1784, and 1786. Sometimes we get lucky in 1785. We got really lucky in Mecklenburg County because they list the names of the enslaved members of the household up until 1812, which is a gold mine of information. And so we see Kitty in 1790. Kitty wasn't named in Burwell's household in 1789 because they hadn't gotten married yet when the tax list was made. And the way these lists are broken down is people above the age of 16 and then people below the age of 16. And this 2 here is actually the number of white people that are being taxed. So we see Lewis Burwell and then his son Armistead Burwell. So we follow them year by year by year. And this is what's so great about the tax list, is that on a yearly basis, you can track people at a time and a place. So I've left out 1791 and 1792 only because, you know, I didn't want to put all of the tax lists on the screen. But in 1793, we see Kitty again. And if you were with us last month, we see John B., who is the son of Isaac B. So that same tax list, we see 2 descendants of Bray School scholars, which I just find really interesting. And I wonder a lot about that. You know, they both came into this household through 2 different ways. Because John B. and Isaac, his father, were with the Lewis Burwell household prior to Lewis's marriage to Elizabeth Harrison. And then all of a sudden you have Kitty come in. And so I wonder what that was like to have the son and a daughter of a Bray School scholar in the same household. So before we move on to the next screen, any questions or comments or observations about what you're seeing here? Okay, we're going to go forward. So then, oh, yes, question in the chat. Oh, yeah, thank you. So then we'd look for Kitty in more records. And so Lewis Burwell writes his will in 1800. And in his will, he doesn't really specify his enslaved household. But what he does say, which kind of gave me a little bit of a clue, is that I give all the Negroes which came by my present wife, which Negroes are to be allotted to her. So it's important to also understand how property worked. And of course, enslaved people were considered property at this time. And so if you are a wealthy woman marrying into a wealthy family, they're going to also, while Lewis was going to be taxed on the enslaved household, when it came time to divide the enslaved members up in the household or between heirs, it was really going to, he didn't have the rights to assign those enslaved people that had come through Elizabeth Harrison's inheritance to his other children with his first wife. And that, we see that a lot. We see that with George Washington. In his will, he was not when he freed the slaves that he had from his will, he was not able to free the enslaved people that came through Martha's Custis line, because those were not his property, for lack of a better word, to free. So the same thing is happening here. Elizabeth Harrison comes into the marriage with inherited enslaved people. And so they are going to make provisions that those people are going to be assigned to her children, the 4 children. That was a long way of saying it was easy to, it starts to be a little bit easier how to track the people when you know kind of what the law is requiring of people. And so this was a screenshot of the will, but what we were able to do was, in the inventory that was taken in 1801 after Lewis Burwell passed away, we're able to see Kitty, and then we were able to find that she had children, and her children are named. Kitty and her children, Clarissy, Nathan, and Walter Harrison. There's a lot here. We have the Harrison last name, which clearly shows that they came with her, that this is the right Kitty. We have Nathan, probably named after her brother, Nathan, Aggy's son, Nathan. And so we're really looking at that, that family grouping that had been separated by Betty Randolph's will. But here at least we get a glimpse that Kitty is having children, and they are at least listed together. They're all in the home house list. There's an old field list, an inventory of people at that part of Lewis Burwell's plantation, and then the home house list. So any questions at this point, any comments or observations, anything that perhaps isn't clear? Oops. We good? Okay, I'm going to go ahead on. So when doing this research, and particularly it's great that in Virginia, we have the Chancery Court records have mostly been digitized, I think, and they're all online through the Library of Virginia. The Chancery Court records are a wealth of information. These are courts where a judge determines the outcome of the case. They are very useful because they will contain a lot of information about relationships, locations. Sometimes in these court documents, you will get copies of wills, you will get maps, plats from property. And usually it's when a judge needs to really decide how something is going to be distributed, how an estate is going to be settled. And when you're doing African-American genealogical research, and particularly looking at enslaved members of households, this is where you might get really lucky and find the names of the people. And this is the cover, the screenshot is a cover sheet to that Chancery Court record in 1804. And so we have the list of everyone who was enslaved by Lewis Burwell, everybody by name. And because Elizabeth Burwell, or Elizabeth Harrison Burwell, was the second wife and had children with him, but there were also children from the first wife, it got a little litigious. And so we see that some of the members of the first wife's family were going to make sure that everything was divided evenly and fairly. This Chancery Court record is about 31 pages long. I've seen some that are 3 pages long. I've seen some that are hundreds and hundreds of pages long. So this was a fairly reasonable one. And so this is where we were able to figure out who went where, essentially. So any questions about Chancery Court records before I go into looking at what we were able to discover? Okay, we will go ahead forward. So this is one part of one page from that Chancery Court record. And this is where we know that we found Kitty and her family in the inventory, but what was going to happen to them after the estate was settled? What we find is that Kitty and Clarissy, Nathan, and Walter Harrison are all designated to go to the widow, Elizabeth Burwell, because if we remember correctly, in the will, those, the enslaved that came with her by marriage, or by her inheritance, they were designated to go to her. And her 4 children in 1804, when this Chancery Court was finally decided, or when the case was decided, all 4 of those children were underage. They were not yet 21. So she had to be the keeper. So they were going to go to her first until her children came of age. But what was very clear is that when her 4 children did come to age, or equally divided at her death, they were to be divided between her 4 children: Henry Harrison Burwell, Peyton Randolph Burwell, Jane Blair Burwell, and Martha Christian Burwell. So that was what was decided in 1804. Any questions so far? I will say that this Chancery Court record, the handwriting was pretty clear, and some are not. So I got kind of lucky on that one. All right, I'm going to go to the next screen, because this really is the breakdown of everyone from that court record. And we really get a sense of just how many people we're talking about that were enslaved by Louis Burwell. And the thing about the Chancery Court records, and this goes in hand with making sure that you know and you're tracking the White family as well, is to know all the players involved. And so these people here, Samuel Good, John Ravenscroft, Edward Tabb, and Richard Boyd, in the Chancery Court record, it clearly states which Burwell daughter they were married to. And so it's important to know, again, who the daughters are marrying, who these players are, and the people that were assigned to each of the heirs, because then that's going to be the next step, is for tracking them. So any questions? Am I going too fast, or is this all making sense to people? What do we think?
It's good. Keep going.
Okay, thanks. All right, so what happens after 1804? Oh, we got somebody in the chat. Oh, very good. How old are Kitty's children at this point? It's a good question. It's in 1804, they are still under the age of 16. And I'm glad you raised that question, because what we see next is, let's see if I can get the screen to go there, in the tax list. So we follow Elizabeth Burwell then in the tax list. So in 1804, we have Kitty here. And all of these people are over the age of 16. And then we have a man named, or a boy named Stephen, who's over the age of 12, but under the age of 16. And this is what I love so much about tax records. And I know that sounds really geeky. And I was in a class a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about how much I really like tax records. And somebody said, this is really geeky. But the thing is, the tax records can reveal a lot of information. They don't always reveal relationship information, but they can give us some clues as to when people were born, and those elusive circa dates of birth, especially for enslaved people. So in this 1808 list, we see Kitty here. And then all of a sudden we see Clarissy has popped up. She's over the age of 12, but she's under 16. So we know that she is now, we can start to track a little bit of a circa date of birth, or a year of birth rather. And then by 1812, Clarissy is over 16, and now her brother Nathan is over 12, but under 16. And so this is how we're tracking the people in these records. So of course, 1812 was the last year that Mecklenburg County listed the enslaved people in the taxpayer's household. But at least we could see that they were still together. So we don't see Walter, unfortunately. But we are able to see that this household is, or at least this family is still together. We're also seeing by 1812, Henry Burwell and Peyton R. Burwell are over 16. So all of a sudden, Elizabeth's sons are starting to come of age. So, any questions before we move on from this? Observations? No? Okay. So in 1814, so 2 years after that last tax list, Henry and Peyton, oh yes.
I did have a question about that because I was curious, like, how did you know to look in the tax records? And like, was this a traditional thing where they listed all of the slaves across the country, where they would list them as property within the records? Or is this specific to the South, of how you would track them? And where would you get these older tax records if you were like, doing this research on your own?
Right. So it's definitely something that I've used in the past with past projects. So I kind of know to look at the tax records. I'm not sure about other states, but I do know that for Virginia, and if I know we've got some genealogy friends on the line with us, so please feel free to add in. But I know in Virginia, we do know that in 1783, 84, and 86, Virginia tax commissioners were to include the names of enslaved on those tax lists. We got really lucky that Mecklenburg County tax commissioners continued to name the enslaved people in the household up until 1812. That was just, I don't know whether that was a fluke. That was the first time I had seen something like that. But we do know that, so as far as finding the tax records, Family Search unindexed records is really where I go to. So you go to Family Search, you go to Catalog, and then the drop-down menu to catalog. So it's Search, and then the drop-down menu to Catalog. And then once you put in the county that you're looking for, it should give you a list of documents that are available online to view. And then I always go under taxation and I look at personal property tax lists. That's where I find those old lists. Now it is a matter of going page by page by page because they are unindexed, which means if you just put a name in Family Search to just search the records, 9 times out of 10, it's not going to come up in a tax record because a lot of those haven't been indexed yet. So I hope that answers your question. So.
Yes.
Elizabeth, we have a Margot with a hand raised.
Okay. Yes, Margot.
Yeah, I do research in North Carolina. I'm not going to speak for all of North Carolina, but I can tell you in my county that I work in the most, Randolph County in the Piedmont, that is not the case. They only list free people of color in the tax lists. They do not list the names of slaves.
Okay, good to know. Thank you for sharing that. And Renata, thank you also for your comment that yes, you want to look at tax records in all of the slaveholding states.
Yeah, can I just piggyback a little bit on that because
Sure.
the thing is, nothing is the same anywhere. So you have to look. So you have to know that tax records are one of the places that you may find information about enslaved persons. Sometimes they will be named, sometimes they won't be named. Sometimes it would just say, two 18-year-old females and the amount that the enslaver had to pay on them or something like that. But at other times I have, and most of my research is in North Carolina, but at other times I've found the enslaved persons named with their ages given and their values given, and sometimes with relationships, family relationships, but there's absolutely no consistency, none. So you just have to make it one of the things that you look for in order to say that your research is exhaustive, and you may get lucky or you may not, but at least you will have looked.
Exactly. Thank you. Anyone else before we go on? No? Okay. So what's happening is that in 1814, Elizabeth Harrison Burwell's children are coming of age. And they basically go to the Chancery Court and say, we'd like to go ahead and have our distribution given to us now. And it wasn't contentious. The mom was totally on board with this. This is what we found in the records, that she signed a deposition that she said, yes, she was absolutely ready to go with this. But at this point, this is when Kitty and her family do get separated. And we see that Kitty goes to Martha C. Burwell, Nathan goes to Henry Harrison Burwell, Walter goes to Peyton Burwell, and Clarissa and two unnamed children go to Jane Burwell. And so again, this is in 1814. And so this is when the children have now been divided up. And what we do know is that from the will and from the 1804 Chancery Court record, Henry Harrison Burwell was the one who inherited the Mansion House property, and then Peyton R. Burwell got part of the property that was right next to that. So they weren't far from each other, at least Nathan and Walter. But we know that with Kitty going to a daughter and Clarissa going to a daughter, there's a real good chance that they're going to get married and then may move away. So this was in 1814. So any questions, comments, or observations on this record?
Just quick question. So
Sure.
you saying that Kitty read the document and she was able to sign for her children to be dispersed the way that they were?
Oh, no. I'm sorry. No, it was Elizabeth Harrison Burwell.
Oh,
Was
okay.
okay with her sons going to court to have their distribution done before her death, because the
Oh,
will
okay.
had said that on her death, these enslaved people would be, and their heirs and their increase would be separated between her children. But they wanted to do that before she died. So, and
Okay.
she was on board with it. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
sure. So then that was 1814. And in 1816, there was a fire at the Mansion House and it burned down. And Henry Harrison died, and his wife of several months died in the fire, along with several other people, including 4 of the enslaved members of the household. And it was talked about in the newspaper, And also when Tanya and I went to Mecklenburg County, there was a plaque that talked about Stoneland. That was the name of Lewis Burwell's plantation, was Stoneland in Mecklenburg County. And so the fire is going to then cause another estate distribution to have to take place. What we don't know for sure is whether Clarissy and her children, who would have been with Jane, and Kitty was with Martha. We don't believe at this point that they were among the 4 people who died. We are kind of keeping our eye out for that right now. But so this was a big deal. So this was Mecklenburg County where this fire happened, and it's the newspaper article is showing up as far as north as Alexandria. So it was kind of a big deal and a big thing that happened. So then what happens is they go to Chancery Court again. And so in 1826, so even though it's 10 years after the fire, they are still trying to figure out who gets what of Henry Harrison Burwell's estate, because he died without any heirs, direct heirs of his own. So part of the Chancery Court record kind of shows who all the people are at this point and who stand to inherit. And then, lucky for us, there's embedded in that 1826 Chancery Court record is the estate accounting. So when we talk about wills and inventories and probates, it's a multi-step process. And so you don't want to just look at a will, and you don't want to just look at the inventory, but you also want to find out what happened with the estate accounting until the end of the estate distribution. And sometimes all of that can happen without having to go into Chancery Court. So you would want to look into the court records, and especially the probate records is where you'll find most of those. But because the Burwells constantly seem to be taking each other to court, I'm finding the records for Kitty and her family, mostly in the Chancery Court records so far. So the estate accounting is basically all the expenses that were associated and all the debts that were due, and creditors, any kind of expense that was done with the estate. Then what happens? So it starts in 1816, soon after the fire. But in 1817, we see that in February 12th, 1817, Blair Burwell purchases Nathan from Henry Harrison's estate. So we're tracking Nathan now into the Blair Burwell household. And Blair Burwell was among the children and heirs of Lewis Burwell from his first wife. So then we have some crossover. Again, this is why it's important to make sure that you know kind of the White family genealogy, especially if there are multiple wives and multiple children. And so that's where we see Nathan next. So any
Can you hear
questions?
me?
Mhm.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
I don't have a question per se. Could you go back
sure.
one screen to the newspaper article
Yes.
where it says, at the end of the article, Miss Martha Burwell saved herself by jumping out of an upstairs window and was caught by a servant woman. She fortunately received but little injury. That servant woman was my great-great-grandmother, and I don't know about little injury, but she broke her arm saving that girl, Martha.
Miss Loretta, thank you so much for sharing that. I wondered whether you were going to share that this evening.
I almost didn't, but that is, she's not named in the article, but her name was Fanny.
Okay. Fanny caught Martha Burwell.
Right.
That fire. Oh, thank you.
You can find, I found my Vance County book. I don't know if you guys have this book. Do you have it?
I was looking for that today. I have not found it. No.
Yeah, this is, you can find some things more names in this book.
Okay. Great. And who's it's Vance County history?
Let's see if I can read it. The Heritage of Vance County, North Carolina. Vance County Historical Society.
Great.
What is the connection to Vance County? Did the family leave Virginia and go to Vance County?
Spotswood did. He was one of the children of the first Louis Burwell's wife, and Spotswood took my great-grandmother Fanny with him down to Vance County, and they started a plantation called Spring Grove.
Okay.
And some of them went there.
Okay, I run a Facebook group that includes Vance County. It's Franklin, Granville, Vance, and Warren County. If you happen to be on Facebook,
I don't do Facebook. I'm
I'll put a
sorry.
link. Oh, you're not on Facebook? Okay.
No, I don't do Facebook. I'm sorry.
All right. Thank you.
I want to be incognito, so I don't do Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, so moving on to, where were we? Okay, so yes, so then Nathan was purchased by Blair Burwell, and the family goes on a little while longer on. This 1826 Chancery Court record actually is a little bit more in depth, and there was a lot of depositions. This one was a little bit more contentious, but embedded in all of this was it was mentioned that the heirs were making sure that at the slave sale, they were not going to consider outsiders and their offers of purchasing. So you do get a sense that the Burwell heirs at least wanted to keep the enslaved household members with them, with their family, which makes it easier as far as genealogically researching, makes that easier if that was indeed the case and they were able to do that. So, so you can find, sometimes you can find maybe some intent in the records, as well as relationships, as well as the movement of people. So, and also the dates and times and how this all takes place. So essentially, we started with Aggy, a Bray School scholar, and now through Kitty, we've been able to build out the family tree a little bit further than we had in November. And again, the work is a little painstaking. It's a little slow sometimes. Sometimes you get a lot of things landing in your lap really fast, and then weeks go by with nothing. But at least we've been able to kind of started to reconstruct Aggy's family tree a little bit further along than we were back in the fall. So we're left with some questions and next steps. We certainly want to follow the Burwell family members in the records. I want to learn Clarissy's children's names so badly, and also look for Kitty and where Nathan and Walter go next in the records. We have a research trip planned for this Thursday. Tanya and I are heading back to Mecklenburg County because, again, while there is so much online right now, not everything's online, and some of it is still going to the courthouse and going through those record books, those will books, and any other books that they might still happen to have. And I was able to learn that Mecklenburg County did not suffer much record loss. So again, very, very blessed and lucky that this is where our trail is leading us. But also making contact with the African-American community there in Mecklenburg County. And then, of course, I don't want to leave Aggy and Betsy and Nathan in Charles County behind. We hope to return to looking at those records as well. So that is really it as far as the presentation. We have about 10 more minutes left if people want to share. I do want to mention a few things coming up if you happen to be in Williamsburg. and connected with William and Mary. There's an upcoming event. It's the TAC faculty lecture that's happening on March 6th in the newly opened Glen Close Theater of Phi Beta Kappa Hall. It's going to be a history of African American theater and Black theater at William and Mary. And so the QR code is there to get more information. And then, as always, we hope you will stay in touch with the William and Mary Bray School Lab. This is our website address. This is the way to get in touch with us. If you have any emails or follow-up questions, I certainly welcome any suggestions or comments from this evening's program. You can follow us on Facebook for those who choose to do social media. And again, you can review the recordings on our YouTube channel. But I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing at this point. And so we can just kind of open the floor up for some discussion. So
I have a question.
I'm sorry, before you do that, someone asked for the QR
yeah,
code.
let me go back to that. I just caught that. So let me see, share screen, go here. Share. There we go. And there we go. All right. I can leave this up for a little bit longer if people have questions or comments.
We've got a question in the chat. Is there any indication that the children of Bray School scholars were taught to read by their parents?
Children of Bray School scholars
Were they
taught
taught to read by their parents?
We do have there is some research that was done by Dr. Antonio Bly, specifically about Isaac B. The fact that Isaac B's father was a free man who had been a student of Fleming Bates. And so while Isaac B, we know, was at the Bray School, and the curriculum was that they were to be taught to learn how to read, there is some question and some indication that Isaac may have learned from his father as well. So it's entirely possible that the children, came to the school with knowledge already. They weren't, what's the expression that Maureen, you use, that and Janice Kennedy uses? They did not come to the school empty-headed. They were given skills at the Bray School, but maybe that was already augmenting what they already had with them. That's a good question.
Yeah, and let me actually, I want to maybe restate the question, and Kristen can tell me if this helps. Is the question asking whether the Bray School scholars taught their children to read? Yes.
Yes, for
Okay.
example,
Oh,
did Aggie teach Kitty? Did Isaac teach John B?
I would hazard a guess that it probably was happening. I don't see it in the documentation just yet, but for all intents and purposes, we think that that would definitely be a skill that would be taught and be passed down. Maureen, do you have more to add to that?
Yes, in the sense that the Bray Associates, who funded the majority of the expenses of the school, were very intentional, and they wanted the children who went to the Bray School to take their skills and to share them with those who were in the household with them, with their peers, some of whom might have been blood kin to them. So if we think about that intentionality, it bears certainly assuming it's a fair assumption that also that transmission of knowledge and learning to read and do other things that were taught at the Bray School were also passed from Bray School scholars as they grew up and would become adults to their own children. So that principle of the information that was disseminated at the Bray School was to go into the community that would cross and cut different ways across and then down through generations as well.
Thank you.
All right, another question in the chat. Were not slaves,
Mm-hmm.
I think it means were slaves not permitted to read by law? Is that the question, Denise?
Right. Yes, so that, not at this point in history. It wasn't until the 1830s when those anti-literacy laws start to go into effect. So, so at the time of the Bray School in 1760 to 1774, it was not illegal. There was some thought about whether or not the children were taught to write, and that was perceived as possibly dangerous if for them to have that knowledge. Although we have some indication, particularly from Isaac B's second runaway ad, that he could read and write. And so again, it did become illegal. We do know, however, that there were enslavers that still taught their enslaved people to read, even after those anti-literacy laws go into effect.
All right, and we've got another hand raised. Go ahead, and I'm going to take that down from the screen. Is it Venetia?
Yes,
Yes, please
yes.
go ahead.
Hello. I'm an unusual one. My family came into Hampton Roads in the 1600s and nobody left. So I left for a little while, for about 30 years. But the people that, I guess my Caucasian family came into Williamsburg and are buried in Britain Parish. Their names like mirror my family names or names of men in my family. I'm African American. And I'm just trying to see, is there a list of the attendees of the Bray School?
Yes, definitely. If you go to our website, you can just Google Bray School Lab, William and Mary Bray School Lab. Under the research portal, our William and Mary students have transcribed the 3 attendance lists that have survived or that we've discovered so far. There's a 1762 list that lists the names of the children and their ages and their enslavers. There's a 1765 list and a 1769 list. And so that is all available on the website under our research portal.
Let me also add that another way to get to that information is if you also go to the William and Mary Bray School Lab website and go to research and engagement, and then click under descendant engagement and scroll down that text. There are a couple hyperlinks. One is a hyperlink to the student lists that have been combined. So those 3 lists were combined into a single document and then arranged by households. Elizabeth mentioned the 3 years, 1762, 1765, and 1769. Those are the only 3 known lists to have survived to present out of the 14 years of operation of the Williamsburg Bray School. And we know that for some of those years, student lists, student reports were just simply not made. So we have an incomplete data set, but everything that we do know of and that other scholars have identified as extant has been put together. Either you can see the transcription in the research portal or go again to research and engagement and then descendant engagement and scroll down to the hyperlink that will give you a 2-sided PDF document that arranges the household. And then in brackets, it tells you what year or years each student attended the school.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. And I'm just so happy to have an opportunity to attend something like this because I picked it up, I picked my genealogy up and I put it back down.
Right.
So
And that document is, I'm sorry, and that document, just for everyone's benefit, that document is downloadable. So you can save that to your computer for your own work, for your own research.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So I saw that Miss Loretta, did you have a question? I'm worried you got maybe cut off there a little bit.
I was just trying to, I remembered a name from the Ann Powell Commonplace book.
Okay.
And I'm not remembering the date of that book, but there was an Aggie on that list and she had a sister named Sue. I don't
Aggie.
know if that's your Aggie or a different Aggie, but the Virginia Historical Society has that book. I have lost it 20 years ago. But today I remembered the name Sue was on there, and she was listed as Aggie's sister.
That is fantastic. We actually contacted the Virginia Historical Society, which is now housed in the Virginia Virginia Museum of History and Culture. And they were able to send us a digitized, just several pages of that book. And so Tanya and I were looking at those today, looking at the lists. We're actually going to go to Richmond, I think, on Wednesday to see the full book if the museum can pull it for us. So we're hoping to see that book in its entirety this week. Yes, to follow up on that lead. Thank you so much.
And for everyone, I did put that link to that document with the list of the students' name in the chat. So you can click on that and go directly to that.
Well, folks, I want to be mindful of everyone's time this evening. This conversation has been great. The discussion has been exciting for me, for sure. I appreciate everybody's questions. Happy to stay on for a little bit longer if there are more questions, but certainly it is a little after 7. I want to be respectful of your time. We will be having another Zoom session next month. I believe it's going to be on Monday, the 18th. I haven't quite figured out the scholar just yet that we're going to be focusing on, but because you registered for this evening's session, you should be getting an email about the next session if you'd like to register for that one as well. So, but any other comments, any questions, any suggestions for making this series better? Please let me know. Yes, Denise, I see your hand up.
Do you have an email list that you send out for your classes or your workshops, your programs? I can't make the 18th because I'll be in surgery that day.
Okay.
Literally under the knife.
Fine. I believe we are compiling an email list. Let's see. We will have the emails that you registered with this evening, and I will make sure that our director of engagement, community engagement, has that, and we start compiling that list. Yes.
What did it mean by the text set icons on your right?
Sorry, I said that there was a question about saving being able to download the document. If you click on that link and it goes to the website, you should see in your right corner.
I actually have the PDF.
Oh.
That it won't let me attach it to this meeting. So I think you have admin restrictions on.
Okay, well, the link is, okay, so were you trying to drop the PDF in? Is that what you're saying?
Because I actually have it from the genealogy workshop that Elizabeth did with Polk County.
Sure. Okay. Well, the link that's in the chat takes you right there. And I said that the icon was on your left to download, to save. Actually, the icon's on your right. So I was correcting myself. So at this age, I think I would know my left and right, but you know, that goes sometimes. So, but if there's any questions or any concerns, you can always email us.
Yes,
braylab@wm.edu. Any questions about access, we can always just send it to you directly. And then just really encourage you to explore our website. Got lots of things going on there, blogs, access to other media that we've created over the few years now that we've been operating, and we keep building on it.
Yep. All right. Well, anybody else? Any last comments? Any last questions? Please stay in touch with us. This has been so great this evening.